that if any activity is to involve a marae, a warrant would be required.
Grant Robertson.
Yeah, and I thank the Minister for his explanation of that. Just to follow through so that we get, on this side of the House, absolutely clear about what is being protected here. So I had done the same search that the Minister and his officials had done to find out where private premises actually occur in the Act, and as the Minister says, they occur under the definition of visual surveillance. If you follow that through, and it might have been helpful had that clause said what the next clause says, which is a visual surveillance device, has the meaning given to it by Section 3.1 of the Search and Surveillance Act. If it had actually said that about the definition of visual surveillance, that might have been a little helpful. But if you follow that through, and I haven't exhaustively searched this, but when you get into the powers of the SIS acting under Intelligence Warrant Clause 65, which is also in Part 4 of the bill, we then run through effectively all of the things that the security agency can do. It can enter places and vehicles, it can install, use or maintain various matters, access things, take photographs, open vehicles. This is the bit, incidentally, Mr Chair, that slightly makes my blood run cold when it comes to the activities of the agencies, because this is where the rubber hits the road about the intrusive nature of the powers that we are granting here. And we've talked previously in earlier parts, Mr Chair, about the need for balance, because we do need powers like this, but this is where it really is laid out in Clause 65. One of those things, if we just take the example of 65(1)(b), is to install, use, maintain or remove a visual surveillance device. So that would apply in a private premise such as a marae. I think while I can see the point the Minister's making, it is an enabling provision as well. It specifies a type of private premise where a type of surveillance will take place, and then in turn how that surveillance would be undertaken. So I think I understand what the Minister was saying, but I also think it works the other way, which is what causes the problem here. Not so much that it's possible that a marae would be a place in which visual surveillance would be undertaken, but that it is singled out as being so. And I think so. I think it's a slightly different issue than the one that the Minister is raising. I get what he's saying, but when you go back to private premise under the definition here, I really don't understand why it can't just say private premise means a private residence or any other premise to which members of the public do not frequently have access. Just say that. And that way there wouldn't actually be the uncomfortable concern that I can completely understand that Chris Farfoy and Kelvin Davis have both raised, that particularly in the shadow of the Urewera raids, that this would be specifically mentioned. I'm never a great fan, actually, as it happens, of subclauses like any other premises to which members of the public do not frequently have access. I mean, that's, the Eastern Suburbs Cricket Club and various other places like that, places such as that. A marae may sit as being both a public and a private place, but I'd be extremely surprised if it's necessary to mention it. So I don't think anyone on this side of the House is accusing the government of a particularly ill intent here. I just think that in the spirit of trying to build public confidence in these institutions, putting a word like marae into the middle of that sentence just starts to rekindle some of the very things that this legislation has sought, and mostly very successfully sought, to resolve in the New Zealand public's mind. So, as I say, I could be misinterpreting it, but I think when I follow through, it is in fact an enabling clause as well as potentially trying to make it consistent with the Search and Surveillance Act. And I do wonder if officials might consider, in the time we have available on Part 4 of this bill, whether or not just the deletion of the words marae would actually have any effect whatsoever. And I suspect it wouldn't. I suspect, other than now being slightly inconsistent with the Search and Surveillance Act, actually it wouldn't prescribe the powers of the Security Intelligence Service, and may actually help build some trust and faith in the institutions.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.